Mike Maggio's The Appointment operates squarely within the modern absurdist tradition, employing the institutional environments of academia and bureaucracy not merely as settings, but as active mechanisms of existential negation. The novella follows Professor Jeremy Randolph Withers, an aging academic whose life begins to unravel after a brutal subway assault and who soon finds himself ensnared in a system of opaque authority, missed appointments, and accusations that cannot be verified, answered, or resolved. While the novella is frequently described as Kafkaesque, its relationship to Kafka is not superficial or stylistic alone. Rather, Maggio adopts the structural logic of absurdism itself, allowing narrative causality, time, and identity to deteriorate in tandem with the protagonist's faith in rational process. The narrative arc of The Appointment is coherent and deliberate, though it resists conventional notions of plot progression. The opening subway assault functions as an inciting incident, but its significance is metaphysical rather than merely physical. Withers' sudden loss of memory, the disappearance of his hat, a sentimental object tied to his mother, and the abrupt cessation of pain suggest not recovery, but transition. The scene introduces the novella's central anxiety, that identity is contingent and fragile, vulnerable to erasure by forces that do not announce themselves. In this sense, the assault serves as a threshold moment, after which the familiar world persists only in degraded and unreliable form. As the narrative progresses, bureaucratic intrusion replaces physical danger as the dominant threat. The appearance of the agents from the so-called Bureau of Rectification initiates a steady escalation in which authority asserts itself without explanation, jurisdiction, or documentary coherence. These figures speak in procedural language, yet the procedures themselves are inaccessible. Withers is summoned repeatedly, warned of consequences, and accused of failures he cannot comprehend, much less correct. His attempts to act rationally, to consult administrators, locate offices, comply with instructions, only deepen his entanglement. Each effort to restore order paradoxically accelerates disorder, reinforcing one of the central tenets of absurdist narrative, that reasoned action within an irrational system is itself a form of complicity. Midway through the novella, temporal instability becomes pronounced, marking a shift from bureaucratic conflict to ontological collapse. Dates advance inexplicably. Administrators insist that weeks have passed when Withers experiences only days, and institutional records contradict his lived memory. Time, traditionally the guarantor of accountability and continuity, becomes another instrument of accusation. Withers is held responsible for absences, failures, and delays that occur entirely outside his consciousness. This temporal distortion does not merely confuse the reader. It undermines the possibility of ethical self-defense. If one cannot know when one cannot know what one has done. By the latter stages of the narrative, Withers' identity is no longer recognized by others or even fully by himself. Neighbors declare him dead, offices deny his existence, and his professional record is rewritten without his participation. The novella does not culminate in revelation, confrontation, or escape. Instead, it ends in a condition of permanent deferral. The titular appointment is endlessly postponed, relocated, or rendered inaccessible, while compliance is framed as inevitable and understanding as irrelevant. This conclusion is not anticlimactic, but thematically precise, reflecting the absurdist conviction that closure itself is a false promise manufactured by systems of authority. The influence of Franz Kafka is unmistakable, particularly in the structural parallels to The Trial and The Castle. As in Kafka's work, authority in The Appointment is diffuse, omnipresent, and unlocatable. Guilt precedes explanation, and procedure replaces justice. Yet Maggio's novella distinguishes itself by situating these dynamics within the contemporary academic institution. The dean, the secretary, and the evaluative machinery of tenure and assessment provide a familiar framework through which absurdity operates. This choice intensifies the novella's effect, as the reader recognizes the bureaucratic logic not as alien, but as an exaggerated extension of everyday professional life. Maggio's prose style reinforces this thematic coherence through repetition, claustrophobic settings, and seamless shifts between realism and surrealism. Offices, corridors, subway cars, and waiting rooms recur as enclosed spaces where agency steadily diminishes. Language itself becomes suspect, as official speech circulates without reference to truth or meaning. Importantly, the novella resists allegorical simplification. The Bureau of Rectification is never decoded, explained, or symbolically resolved. Its opacity is not a failure of interpretation, but a necessary condition of the narrative's philosophical force. Ultimately, The Appointment succeeds as an absurdist novella because it refuses the consolations of explanation and resolution. Its narrative arc traces not a journey toward understanding, but a progression toward erasure, and its engagement with Kafka is structural rather than imitative. By relocating the logic of absurdism within contemporary academia, Maggio extends the tradition into a modern anxiety, the fear that one may comply fully, act responsibly, and still be rendered invisible. In this respect, The Appointment stands as a serious and effective contribution to the ongoing literature of the absurd, one that speaks with particular urgency to institutional life in the late 20th and early 21st centuries.